Hi friends, my name's Trish Roberts and you're watching Faint Signals from Bega. It's a lovely spring day in Tasmania. So I wanted to just quickly talk about what I had to do yesterday when I went to the post office. I had to fill out one of those awful marriage equality postal vote surveys. Well, it's a postal vote. It's supposed to be a vote, but it's not really. It's not compulsory, and there's talk of people meddling and leaving big stacks of them out in the rain and all sorts of things, and taking them out of post boxes and all sorts of stuff. You can also see through the envelope, and I imagine people who are anti-rights for LGBTIQ people probably, possibly at the post office, or people who deliver the mail are able to, or who collect the mail are able to sort of fiddle with things and pull out the yes votes. So it's not a vote. It's a sort of an awful survey, really, of like a referendum asking if gay people should remain second-class citizens. That's really what it's about. It's not about marriage and about men marrying women, etc. It's really a whole big exercise in homophobia and hate. And I'm disgusted. I'm disgusted to have to participate in it. I'm disgusted with the coalition government because they're a bunch of, no offense to dinosaurs, but they're a bunch of dinosaurs that belong in the last century. And that includes Malcolm Turnbull for allowing this to happen. And of course the Labor Party is no better, because they've quislings, they're moral quislings. They just dilly-dallied around because they don't want to lose any Conservative vote. So they've always sabotaged the going forward of this marriage equality vote. And it shouldn't be a vote anyway. The majority should not be dictating to the minority what their rights are. That's the bottom line. Unfortunately, we have politicians that have no moral spine. No offense to invertebrates. They have no moral spine, and it disgusts me. Anyway, this is what it looked like, the form I had to fill out yesterday. I don't know if you can see it. So imagine if you were heterosexual. I happen to be from the LGBTIQ community. Excuse me. Imagine if you were heterosexual and you had to fill out a form like this, knowing that it's a whole dodgy setup anyway. And even though the majority of Australians are for, marriage equality, this has been set up in a way that it could be sabotaged easily. And even if yes wins, the coalition says they're not going to pass it anyway. But imagine, say, if you're heterosexual and you received a form like this saying, should heterosexual people be allowed to marry? Imagine that. Just think about it for a minute. And having to fill that out, and knowing that other people are filling it out. And not only that, but everybody who has some harebrained opinion feels the need to give their opinion about LGBTIQ people. And then, having the community, having people, having scaremongering, where they're carrying on about gender diversity and what that might do, that it'll destroy whatever, excuse me. Imagine if you were, imagine if as a straight person, as a heterosexual person, you had people going on and discussing you like that, discussing whether you should be allowed to marry, whether you're part of the moral community. Basically, that's what it boils down to. Just imagine. And also imagine if you're recipients of violence, because lots of LGBTIQ people have been on the receiving end of violence because of this ongoing ridiculous homophobia. I came out, in quotes, in 1983. I was born in 1960, and I lived in a period where I never ever heard anything about LGBTIQ people. I lived in a very sort of conservative family who never talked about it. Fortunately, I never heard any homophobia at home, not until later on when I came out, but there was nothing. I was raised in a Catholic school, a Catholic primary school, a Catholic private school from 1969 onwards to 77, and there was no mention of that during those school years. And at 15 I developed depression, serious depression, where I felt suicidal, and I would say that a certain amount of that is related to the experience I was going through and what was presented to me all the time, the heterosexism and the feeling different and not having any sort of support or anything like that. And then it sort of just continues on. Now, I have to say that I've never for a moment in my life felt there was something wrong with me. Not for a second. Just as somebody who is heterosexual probably doesn't sort of think to themselves, there's something wrong with me, that I prefer to have relationships mainly with people of the opposite sex. It's something I've never ever had a problem with myself. Some other people have had a problem with it. I haven't. And that's what causes problems with LGBTIQ people in their mental health, is this constant, the heterosexism in society, and also the sort of this constant, it's spring and there's a lot of pollen in the air, this constant sort of debating whether you're moral persons, really. That's what's underneath all these things about marriage, etc. So, and when I eventually, formally came out, in quotes, I came out to my parents. And my father and mother are much older than I am. I was adopted, so they were they were at least 2 generations older than me. So my mother is still alive. My father died about 5 years ago, but my mother is 101 now, and very healthy 101. And she actually, at the time, she was so relieved that I didn't tell her that I was pregnant. She was more relieved that I was not pregnant than she was that I was coming out to her. But she did say to me, because I took her for a drive, and we were sitting in the car, and she did say to me, well, maybe you should see a psychiatrist or a priest. Now, I didn't feel there was anything wrong with me, but I just to make her happy, I went to see a psychiatrist who was very unfriendly and stood looking out the window while I was talking to him. It was a very short session. He said, well, the homosexuality hasn't been on the disorders list for the last 20 years or so. I saw him in 1983. So, but he was very unfriendly and not at all helpful. He was just standing looking out the window, which the body language says, I'm completely disinterested in you, and sort of a contempt, really. That's what it was. So, so that was my first sort of introduction to professionals in that regard. And then I sort of, I'd gone overseas and come back, and then I made friends with I had a male friend. And by the way, I had a few relationships with men in the late 70s and early 80s, and they were good relationships. They were good relationships, but it wasn't really fulfilling in what I really wanted, you know, the sort of relationships that I wanted to have. And and one of those relationships, I'm still friends with the person who I had a relationship with. He was a very, very nice man, and we had a very lovely relationship for the time that it lasted. And we're good friends. But in 1983, I made friends with this guy. We were really good friends, and I used to go to his house regularly to do yoga, and we were good friends, and we did music together. I'm a singer also, and we did music, and we were going to do some public gigs together. But it turned out, when I eventually, after about 9 months of going to his house and really regularly, when we were good friends, and when I came out to him, what he did was he sexually assaulted me. So that was my experience of coming out, to somebody, to a man, obviously a misogynist, and a homophobe. And, of course, rape is very common today. There's the statistics are 1 in 3 or something women. But being sexually assaulted, when you come out to who you think is a good male friend, and that's their response, that actually gave me panic attacks for a number of years. Now, I'm not telling you this because, it's, oh, poor me. And also, I'm very aware that there are people that are black who are LGBTI. There are people who are trans that are black, and they're being killed in the United States regularly. There are people that are far worse off than I am. And I've never ever felt sorry for myself. I've actually always found homophobia to be completely ridiculous. I actually, most of my life, I've laughed about it until recently, when I've had to fill out this stupid form and had to drive by utes that have signs on it, painted on it, where somebody's actually taken the time of putting a board on the back of his ute and screwing it into the bottom of the ute and hand painting marriage, man equals woman, and driving that around in this area around southeast Tasmania. I mean, how sad. I don't know what's wrong with these people, but this is always my opinion of this kind of thing is, I don't know what on earth is wrong with people, and I don't know why they're so threatened. And I also, I don't think they've probably ever met a gay person or a trans person in their life, whereby, they've grown up in some sort of weird, and I don't know if they've been indoctrinated themselves by their parents, or I don't know what it is, but, or by a really homophobic family. My whole extended family have never really accepted my partners, really, in sort of an overt way. Definitely not in an overt way in my extended family, but my mother has, she hasn't actually acknowledged it to us, to me and my partner, but she's always very, very loving towards us, and I guess that's the best that we can hope for. And I'm very grateful for that. I just wish that it wasn't this sort of just don't speak about it, but I accept you. But that's how it is. As I said, she's a couple of generations older than me, and at least she does that. And so I'm very grateful for that. But why I'm telling you this is because, why I'm sort of telling you these personal details is because I want people to think about, when you're when you're a part of the dominant paradigm, a heterosexual, sort of mainly heterosexual with very, very fiercely defended gender stereotypes, that of course is damaging to those in those genders, but it's very, very damaging to people that are that are on these fringes of that. Very damaging, and and the constant the silent messages and the overt messages, they pile up over time. I haven't really had any sort of, as I said, I've found the whole idea of this homophobia and hate thing to be something to laugh at, and I've made lots of jokes about it, and I truly do think it's funny and sad. It's funny and sad. And it's only been a problem for me just lately because my partner's been doing a lot of advocacy to address some of the hate that's around, and there's lots of it, even though most of the Australian public don't have a problem with LGBTI people. There is a small group of the Christian lobby, Christian in quotes lobby, and stupid politicians, etc., and people with some money that put up ugly billboards and stuff and awful commercials on television. And she's been doing advocacy against that, and she's gotten a little bit upset about it. And of course, I hate to see her feeling upset, and that's kind of affected me a little bit. And so I thought I would just do this quick video and just kind of say to you that even if this goes badly, this postal vote, and it's a bodgy, fraudulent vote, vote in quotes. If it goes badly and the answer is no or whatever, then just remember, do your best to try and support LGBTIQ people in schools, young people, because the young people are very vulnerable. They want to feel like they belong. It's hard enough when you don't have that sort of issue to deal with. And it's much worse, and it causes suicide with some young people. It causes them to suicide. Just like I felt, there was other things going on in my home at the time. Unfortunately, my sister had depression issues, and she had a drug problem, and sadly she suicided when she was 19. That was in 1978. So I had that going on as well as the LGBT. She was adopted, and I think she just had chronic depression, and the 70s was not a good time to have depression. Not that it's ever a good time, but it definitely wasn't then. So I had that going on in the house too. She was in a bad way. But at 15, I sort of thought, God, if I don't pull myself together, if I don't, I kind of went the other way. I don't know how I did it, but I did. But anyway, just remember that LGBTIQ young people are the ones that are going to suffer from this awful survey. They really are. They're going to suffer, and some are going to kill themselves, and it'll all be the fault of this stupid coalition and the stupid Labour Party. Even at some point, Penny Wong was going along with the party lines. That's the problem with having to vote like the party does, against your conscience. Stupid parties, political parties with no real leaders in them. And the Greens aren't much. The Greens, even though they're for marriage equality, they're always reactive. They don't actually show much vision, It's a sad situation we have in Australia, the political climate, and we don't have any real independent media to speak of. Even the ABC, the ABC has been instructed not to use the word marriage equality. They use same-sex marriage. And so is SBS. SBS doesn't use the word marriage equality. They use same-sex marriage. You see? That's the whole setup. The media is just usurped by corporations and right-wing bigots. So that's what we have in Australia. And neoliberalism, the market's dictating what's happening to humans, the market dictating to everybody. That's assisted in all of this as well. Anyway, that's really all I wanted to say. Just remember that to support the Safe Schools program, the Safe Schools program is very important for LGBTIQ children. They're just children. They're just children. So please support Safe Schools and do what you can to prevent this from ever happening again. The rights of the minority should never be left in the hands of the majority. It shouldn't. Anyway, that's all I really wanted to say. I'm just disgusted with the whole thing. But I'm sure I'll have a laugh afterwards, as I've always had. It doesn't matter to me what people think of me, and I know that most Australians don't have a problem with any of this, really. But even if they did, I don't care, really. So anyhow, that's all I wanted to say, and thank you very much for watching. If you're on Facebook, you can join my Facebook page, which is at Vegan Trove Extra. That's VEGANTROVEEXTRA. I'm starting a website soon where I'll post videos on there as well using WordPress, but it'll be faintsignalsfromvega.com, and hopefully that will be up and going in the next week or so. So that's all I wanted to say. So thanks very much for watching. My name's Trish Roberts. Bye for now.